Online at WCTCAM.com or listen on your smartphone with the iHeartRadio or TuneIn apps. Connect with WCTC on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube by searching 1450 WCTC. And now back to Jersey's Morning Show, Jersey Central with Bert Barron.
8:37 back on Jersey Central on the new Talk Radio 1450 WCTC, the voice of Central Jersey. Good to have you back with us inside the Forge Jewelers studios today. Ken Schlager is here, editor of New Jersey Monthly Magazine, for our New Jersey Monthly feature. And Ken, this time around, brought a special guest with him. Would you like to introduce who's with us here today? I'm real excited to have him here.
Yeah, I needed some help on this one.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, I thought, why should I sit here talking about this guy's book when we can bring him right in? But Robert Strauss is a longtime contributor for us.
Mm-hmm.
Lives down in Haddonfield, right, Robert? And
right.
And writes a lot of stories for us from South Jersey. He's particularly interested in history. Previously, a longtime contributor to the New York Times and other publications. So, distinguished journalist.
Wow.
And he wrote this book, and it's of what seems like the most unlikeliest topic. And so the publisher sent me the book, and I found it incredibly engaging and interesting and timely. So we did a little story about it and brought him on to talk about it.
Worst President Ever. I love the title. Very attention-getting. And good morning, Robert. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the trip up. Good to have you in New Brunswick today. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you for having me here.
When I think about James Buchanan, now let me rephrase that. I've never thought about James Buchanan. Am I the only one?
No. It's sort of funny. I've always been a president's nut. I mean, since the time I was a little boy. My father, who was actually a trustee at Rutgers, was a big history buff, and he made me look at every sign that we ever went past, and he loved the presidents, and he had a great presidential library, such as it was in the 1950s and 60s. So Buchanan, being the only president from Pennsylvania, the nearby state, intrigued me. I played basketball in Philadelphia, and I parked next to where his papers are. So, of course, I had to write about him.
Interesting. But to say worst president ever, give me sort of what makes someone the worst president ever?
Well, here's the scoop. When I pitched the book to my agent, I said, half of America thinks Barack Obama was the worst president. The other half thinks George Bush is.
Exactly.
But neither of them started the Civil War. And there's the crux of the matter. Now, there's a long historical riff I can go through, and of course I do in the book. But essentially, his administration led to the Civil War, and all of his indecisions or decisions pretty much cycled down to that.
How bad would a Buchanan administration be nowadays with the hyper media coverage that we have here? I mean, it sounds like this guy would be getting, figuratively killed every day by the media.
Well, perhaps. But, of course, when he ran, ironically enough, he is the most experienced governmental figure ever to run for the presidency. He was in both houses of the Pennsylvania legislature, both houses of Congress, Secretary of State, ambassador to Great Britain, ambassador to Russia. So when he finally plodded to the top, I mean, he had tried to run a few times before. He was 65 years old, which was pretty old back then.
Mm-hmm.
He initially, I don't think he would have gotten the blasting that you see today.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He ran against two other parties. They were new parties. The Whig Party had broken up. There was the Republican Party, which nominated John Fremont, who was a celebrity, not a politician. He was the pathfinder. He was the guy who, with Kit Carson, mapped out the West. And the Know Nothing Party. Can you imagine an election where somebody called themselves the Know Nothing Party? So, you think this is bizarre? Look back then. They were anti-immigrant, but they were anti-Catholic immigrant. And they thought the Germans and the Irish who were coming over were going to take all of our jobs. The Pope was going to set up shop somewhere around the White House, and this was going to be the great disaster. And they nominated our ex-president, Millard Fillmore, who, of course, has one of the best names of any president.
It sounds like he turned around the office pretty quickly then, the next administration.
Yes. So anyway, the Democrats had it in. They were the established party. So Buchanan was going to win. So running for president was different back then. in any case.
Yeah, I'm sure. You have a
Well,
question?
yeah,
Ken?
one of the things that's so fascinating to me that I learned from this book about Buchanan is that he had wanted to be president for a long time. He had really thrown his hat in the ring like 3 or 4 times before he actually became the candidate. He was so aggressive about going after the presidency, and yet he becomes president, and he becomes this do-nothing president who just sat there and repeatedly during times of crisis, whether it was economic crisis or political crisis, the country is falling apart, and he does nothing, and he does nothing right down to the last few months of his presidency. And so how does this guy who so much wanted to be president finally gets in the office and then does nothing with it?
Well, here's the scoop as I would interpret it. I'll tell you the last thing, and of course that's when the state started to secede after Lincoln was elected. He decided that the Constitution said they can't secede, but I can't do anything about it. So that essentially rips apart our country. I mean, I always call him the second most significant American, Washington being the first. Built up everything, started everything, or led to the starting of everything, and Buchanan, which essentially broke it up. And we're still fighting the Civil War in a certain way today. But part of it is that when you become president or a CEO or manager of the baseball team, can you imagine like the manager of the baseball team at a crucial moment in a game deciding whether somebody should steal? He says, I don't know. Should he steal? Should he not? What should I do? So this was Buchanan. Buchanan was he was the best party giver in all of early 19th century America. He really did give the greatest parties. The inaugural ball was probably the greatest inaugural ball ever. But he couldn't make a decision because his whole 40 years of experience before that was all conciliatory. Now, he's probably really one of the nicest guys. But he would, like I said, you give a great party, you want everybody to be pleased. Well, when you get to be president, you got to make a decision whether it's going to please somebody or not. And his indecision led to this horrible presidency.
Yeah, there's always a lot of criticism, at least if you did something, even if it was wrong, at least, well, you did something, but to just do nothing, I think that's the worst choice that anybody could make is to not act on something.
Right, don't just sit there, do something.
Exactly.
Which interesting. By the way, the only bachelor president also is kind of interesting.
That's shocking.
Yeah, we talk about indecision. But the other thing that's interesting that's different today from then is and it's very key to this story is that nowadays we have our elections the first Tuesday in November, and then the president is inaugurated by January 20th.
Right.
Back then, in the 19th century, the president wasn't inaugurated till March. And so there was this pretty long period of time that you were sitting there in Washington, still president, but truly a lame duck. And it was during that period that was it South Carolina, I think, was the first to secede,
Correct.
and then all the other states, southern states, started to secede before Lincoln was even president, while Buchanan was still president.
Wow.
And as Robert tells the story, there was an opportunity there for Buchanan to make a military move into the South to firm up the Union's military presence in the South, and instead that was the dithering. That's where he just did nothing. He let the states secede. He let them actually didn't they actually were able
Took
to
over any military bases, with the exception of Fort Sumter and 3 islands off of Florida. So pretty much everything.
And that also meant taking over the armaments that were there, all the garrisons, all the stores of ammunition and everything else, and of course some of the leading generals and military leaders
We're Southern.
So it was all set up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And people will say to me, well, what would anybody else have done? I said, well, because you got a great example. The Don Corleone of presidents, Andrew Jackson, was faced with the same situation. South Carolina wanted to nullify a law. In that case, it was a tariff law. And he said, no way. And then they said, well, we're going to secede. And he said, no, you're not. and it didn't happen. I mean, they reached a compromise eventually. And South Carolina, while still rebellious, stuck around for another 20, 30 years.
Excellent stuff. Sounds like a great read. Again, the book is called Worst President Ever, and we're thrilled to have author Robert Strauss with us in the studio here this morning. We'll come back with much more. Ken Schlager from New Jersey Monthly is here, too, and we'll come back and spend another couple minutes with our special guest, Robert Strauss. Jersey Central traffic and weather time, 8:47. Traffic and weather every 10 minutes. Let's get the latest on the roads. How's the commute going? Hopefully it's a good one for you. Here's Adam.
We still have that accident working in North Plainfield, westbound 22 at Wilson Avenue, and there's a crash in East Brunswick on 18, northbound approaching Eggers Lane, Eggers Street, and that's causing delays in both directions. Eastbound 78, slow from exit 40 to 45, westbound from 50 to 49, and you have delays on 287, southbound from exit 14 to 12, 5 down to 3, northbound from 1 to 4, again from 10 up to 13, and slowdowns on 24 westbound from 78 to Columbia Turnpike. I'm Adam Walski with your 1450 WCTC traffic update.
And good morning, I'm Tommy Els with 1450 WCTC forecast. Sunshine for today. Again, we'll see some fair weather clouds mix in, especially early on, accompanied by gusty northwest wind. Temperature will be cooler than yesterday. We'll approach 60. Mainly clear tonight, mid-30s with that wind subsiding. Saturday, mostly sunny. Rutgers at noontime, kicking off against Indiana. Going to be a great day for college football. Temps will be 55 to 60, so a little chilly, but bring a jacket. Saturday night, mainly clear, 35 to 40. Sunday, partly sunny, windy, 55 to 60. Right now for Central Jersey, we are in the low 50s, and it is mostly sunny. I'm Tommy Els on 1450 WCTC.
For over 20 years, the place for the best Portuguese cuisine with a modern twist has been Rio Mar at 25 Whitehead Ave in South River. At Rio Mar, your family, and that's why every dish on the menu is made completely from scratch. From perfectly prepared meat, poultry, and seafood to delicious rice dishes and more, you can enjoy the best of Portugal at Rio Mar. Hold your next event, wedding, or holiday get-together in Rio Mar's newly renovated banquet facility. The banquet room can accommodate up to 200 guests, and friendly staff will help you create and personalize your event menu to fit your taste and budget. If you're going to have more than 200 guests, don't worry. Rio Mar has partnered with larger facilities in the area for parties of up to 500 or even more. Rio Mar will even cater your next event at your location. At Rio Mar, it's all about great food, friendly people, and your comfort. Visit ria-mar.com to peruse the menu. Visit them on Facebook and call 732-257-1100 to make your reservation. That's 732-257-1100 for the best Portuguese food you can find in New Jersey.
Take Jersey Central with Bert Barron with you every morning. Listen online at WCTCAM.com. Jersey moves fast. Join the show that keeps you one step ahead. Jersey Central with Bert Barron on the new Talk Radio 1450 WCTC.
It's 8:50. We're back on Jersey Central on the new Talk Radio WCTC, the voice of Central Jersey. Ken Schlager with us for our New Jersey monthly feature. We're going through the November issue. Look for the article in there that Ken wrote about author Robert Strauss and his brand new book, Worst President Ever. Available through all the major retailers now, Robert.
Right,
Book's easy to find, right?
Find it, right?
Yeah. The cover picture, it looks like a cross between W.C. Fields and Ed Grimley. Is that pretty realistic?
I don't know how to sell books. This is all from the publisher, and when they sent it to me, I thought, all right, it's a little cartoonish. But I sort of like it now.
And some raindrops. Looks like it's falling behind him. Kind of gloomy, kind of dreary behind him. Right?
Yes.
Right, really good. But the book is an excellent must-read, and definitely check it out. And television this weekend, we can see you on TV, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be on CBS Sunday morning with Mo Rocca.
That's awesome.
It's on, I think, from 9 to 10:30. I have no idea where I'm in this show.
Wow. Cool. And good to have you here today. That's really great. Anybody been as bad as him? Anybody close to him? You'd say in terms of
I guess when I go through, I do a bunch of riffs about the presidents here and some of my obsessions with him. But I would say that probably his predecessor Franklin Pierce did pretty much the same thing. He was also a somewhat indecisive person. The person who had his ear the most was Jefferson Davis, who eventually became the president of the Confederacy. He was one of his cabinet members. And the only thing different is the Civil War didn't start. And that's really, it is sort of the cataclysmic event. I mean, you could say Richard Nixon had Watergate, but Watergate doesn't compare to the Civil War.
No. And it's funny you mentioned Franklin Pierce, 5th grade in Netcong Elementary School in Morris County. We had to do a presidential essay. My teacher had all the little figurines of the presidents, and I drew Franklin Pierce. And probably the most, nondescript president, maybe one of the most nondescript we've ever had.
Yeah, there's some sad moments about him. His son dying in a train accident in front of him as he was doing his victory lap after winning.
Oh, boy.
But
Wow.
he was also apparently the handsomest president.
Well,
He was the
that's-
Kennedy before Kennedy. And also his best friend was Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author. So he's probably one of the more intellectual presidents.
Give us a take on what you're seeing now between this election cycle here.
We all ought to look at history a little bit, and history now means 5 minutes ago, of course. But when you study the presidents, sort of, Washington started the country. Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Lincoln freed the slaves. FDR, Great Depression, Second World War. So we forget all the stuff that goes on. And I can guarantee you that when they write about this election 40 years from now, it will be just like all other elections. Short of it, if it is like 2000 and has to go to some arbitration. But if somebody wins, this will be another election. There will be another Republican Party. The Republican Party isn't going to dissipate. The Democratic Party will move on. So I hate to say it, but the fallacy of immediacy, just like the game the other night with the Indians and the Cubs, greatest game ever. Well, since when? A year before?
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Interesting. Kenya, any questions for your guest here?
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting is that we had this string of really mediocre presidents: Pierce and Buchanan. I think Millard Fillmore before Pierce.
Press, right?
And then we get Lincoln. And then we get Lincoln, who anyone would acknowledge as, if not the greatest, most important figure in American history after the founders.
A nice upgrade. Yeah.
Yes, it was a nice upgrade. And yet, if we go back to talking about the elections, Lincoln didn't have a plurality.
Lincoln didn't even come close to having a plurality. Because of Buchanan's fumbling and not supporting Stephen Douglas, the Democratic Party broke into three. Well, among the three, they had 60% of the vote. Lincoln just sort of jumped in. Now, you may be able to make a case that Buchanan was so bad that Lincoln did not have a great bar to jump over. I mean, he certainly couldn't have limboed under it. It was
That's
very
true.
low. But what he was, of course, was decisive. I mean, he made decisions. Now, he was faced with a crisis. So I also say that, if the current candidates or future candidates want to look to look at books or something, they could aspire to be Washington or Lincoln, but it's not likely you're going to start a new country or have the Civil War. So what do you do next? You want to be James Monroe? Pretty good president? I don't know. That's like being the second best ball player on your team. But what you can be is not James Buchanan. And if I hope they read my book.
Don't be him.
Don't be him. Don't be the failure.
Well, good stuff. It was great having you here today, Robert. Good luck with the book going forward again. Worst president ever. 3 words with periods, right? Worst president ever.
Correct.
And make sure you pick up a copy of that book. A great read. And thanks for being here. And Ken, of course, thank you to you as well for arranging to have Robert join us this time around.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
Look
both.
forward to next month. And what's up with December?
Well, speaking of history, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of New Jersey Monthly.
40?
40.
Yeah?
The big 40.
Wow.
We were started in the bicentennial year. I've spent a lot of time researching this myself, and so we'll have a story about the whole history. It'll be a lot of fun to talk about.
That's great. Okay.
And then we also, staying with the theme of 40, we're going to have 40 reasons to love New Jersey.
Oh, I love it.
And
All
I'm
right.
sure you'd want to weigh in on that.
Look forward to that coming
Cool.
up again next month. Thank you, Ken. Again, thank you, Robert. All right.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Jersey Central traffic and weather time, 8:50.